Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this one is interesting in that there's kind of two quote-unquote villains in this episode with a kind of a late twist at the end that I think is kind of interesting. So it starts off in a Chinese pawn shop where a girl that we eventually learn is named Mai Li comes into the shop asking about jewelry. And the guy who runs the shop very openly admits that he has some jewelry for her to show, and is kind of smitten with her a little bit and kind of flirts with her a little bit, and proceeds to show her the jewelry when she discovers a particularly unique ring in a red jewelry box, but he points out that he can't actually show that to anybody, and let alone take it out and give it to someone, but she merely asks if even she's not allowed to see it, at which point he decides to make an exception and show it to her, at which point he gets in a bit of an altercation with his boss on the phone when he goes to call somebody about a deal with them on the phone, but she asks how, and as he's arguing, she asks how much it is, but he merely tells her it's not for sale, but then goes back to his discussion on the phone. At which point she leaves the ring box on the desk and then walks away. And of course, it's at this point where the actual person who's looking for it, a guy in a large trench coat whose face we don't really see, he walks in, and immediately everything gets quiet and dark, and of course the guy immediately hangs up, and the guy in the trench coat demands to the pawn shop owner where his ring is, and sure enough, the guy goes to go get it and presents him the box, only for it to be revealed that the ring box no longer has the ring in it and actually has the girl's panda ring that she was wearing in it instead, which of course makes the guy in the trench coat very angry with him and demands to know what kind of game he's pulling. But when the guy insists that it was there just a moment ago, he instead starts shooting lightning and zapping up the place, as while Mai Li is revealed to have swiped the ring with her own, and that's where the opening episode of the mystery comes in. But in case it then sets up in Shen's cafe, where in Chinatown, where everybody's kind of just talking, about everything that's going on in their lives. Shaggy is currently eating some special curry ice cream that apparently Chen has that specific kind of ice cream sandwich, because he actually reveals that he actually invented that kind of dish. But meanwhile, Scooby voices the fact that Scooby and Velma and Daphne actually talk about the fact that long story short, Daphne is going to be introducing Fred as her boyfriend to her parents this evening during a meeting with a guy that they're going to be introducing, and he's a research delegate from China as well. But she merely points out that he's going to be that she's very nervous because this is the first time her parents have actually seen them officially as a couple, and is worried about what they're gonna think, because obviously Fred's a little dorky. He's admittedly a little dorky, and she's a little worried they won't like him. And then thanks Scooby for listening, to which Scooby responds, "No problem." At which point, Velma actually walks in with Mai Li and introduces her. And what's interesting here is that Shaggy and Mai Li immediately hit it off, but but with much to Velma's chagrin, she openly dissuades the two of them from kind of interacting for extended periods of time. But it is at this point where Chen shows up with the special ice cream bars he's prepared for everybody, and he sets them down on the table and but then he notices Mai Li's ring and proceeds to leave and excuse himself rather awkwardly. At which point Velma then proceeds to explain to the rest of the group who Mai Li is, and what she explains is that Mai Li is actually an exchange student that they actually exchanged out for hot dog water in a very humorous scene where she actually eats some gluten noodles and gets very sick. But But she explains that she's there for a couple of weeks, and that and explains that she's going to be there to actually be for an exchange student until further notice. With Shaggy just being happy about the fact that he gets to quote unquote make a new friend, as he puts it. But they do kind of hit it off again, as they pointed out, and Velma isn't happy about any of that. Because obviously she still has very strong feelings for Shaggy, and also knows that Shaggy likely isn't the kind of person to open up for a relationship. So visibly, she's very annoyed with him for that reason. But meanwhile, Daphne points out that Fred isn't actually there because as we find out, both the Fred Jones and Fred Jones Sr. are out showing out a Chinese delegate that is eventually going to be showing up at Blake Manor later that evening. And they're just kind of showing him around town to help him do some research into how Crystal Cove actually operates and about how it actually works. And also throughout this entire sequence, she points out that she's just very happy to say boyfriend because she's very happy about the fact that she and Fred are dating. But in any case, she does point out that that it is her boyfriend several times throughout the span of that one conversation. But once they actually point out, they decide that they actually have to go and meet Fred anyway because it's about time to actually go and meet up with him for the dinner. And they decide to leave. Meanwhile, Fred and Fred Jones and Fred Sr. are currently showing a guy named Mr. Wang who's currently visiting. And sure enough, he's there to kind of learn more about how Wang is about how Crystal Cove actually operates. And long story short, Fred Sr. just explains how it's a tourist trap. Basically, he just explains all the different super quote unquote supernatural things that cause Crystal Cove to be such a hotbed of tourism. Well, Fred Jr. is just kind of along for the ride in that regard, and Mr. Wang actually does indeed thank Fred and Fred Sr. for their hospitality, pointing out that he hopes that his stay in Crystal Cove will actually be a very memorable one and a very intuitive one. At which point the rest of the group intervenes with once again Shaggy unwittingly flirting with Mai Li, and it's at this point where Velma finally decides to kind of break the two of them up and drag Shaggy off to kind of tell him to stop flirting with her. But when Shaggy insists that he's just being nice, she then proceeds to point out that the last time he was that nice to someone, she wound up listening to breakup songs on repeat, which is funny and a little bit sad. But in case it's at this point where Fred actually introduces the rest of his friends, and Velma proceeds to introduce Mai Li, and Mr. Wang has a very interesting reaction to all of them, and specifically Mai Li, because he notices her ring and is very interested in the ring itself. But it's at this point where Fred Sr. actually invites him to what he refers to as a shindig or a hootenanny, as he puts it in layman's terms. But and with Mr. Wang just being very happy about the fact that he was invited to their shindig, and it's at this point where Mai Li and the rest of the group then proceed to get ready to go off and go get ready for the dinner, with Mr. Wang's eyes kind of following Mai Li a little bit, and it's not exactly subtle who the villain is in this one, but it's the case. It's at this point where they actually arrive at the Blake dining hall, and Blake actually, Shaggy is not so subtly trying to get Scooby to switch seats to sit with him so he can sit next to Mai Li, and Scooby doesn't take the hit initially until Shaggy just straight up tells him to move. So Scooby decides that he's being a little bit pushy, but decides to move anyway, and Shaggy then proceeds to scoot up next to Mai Li. At which point, Barty Blake, Daphne's father, then proceeds to begin to start a toast for all the people that have gathered there, including Mr. Wang and everybody else. But he also then proceeds to shoot a death glare at Fred while he's giving his toast, because he kind of doesn't like Fred very much. But in case, as he's giving his toast, the lights suddenly go out, and Barty is very confused and wonders what exactly is going on, at which point a red-robed wizard then proceeds to appear and tells them that to not seek the dragon's heart, and that the dragon's heart belongs to no one, and proceeds to start shooting lightning around the room. with us, and also with everybody kind of just cowering to try and get away from the Red Wizard, and the Red Wizard continues to point out that the dragon gem that the dragon's heart doesn't belong to anybody, and also points out that by being here they have brought great danger to Crystal Cove, and it's clear that he's addressing Mai Li. Because he actually points out, because obviously Mai Li is very much into, he obviously notes that obviously Mai Li has the one ring that winds up, that is actually a very important thing throughout the mystery, but it's left vague as to who he's actually talking to, but it's implied to be Mai Li. But in case it's at this point where Fred realizes that he actually needs to do something, and immediately springs into action and reveals that he actually booby-trapped Daphne's house. So, as it turns out, he actually set a booby trap in the dining hall, which, and after pulling a lever, it's revealed to actually be a net trap that, then proceeds to try and ensnare the wizard, who teleports out of the way, and Fred actually winds up catching everybody else instead. And when everybody's visibly annoyed about the fact that there's a net in Daphne's house, he reveals that he actually set up the booby trap a while ago. When Velma points out asks him why he did that, he merely points out that it's not just Daphne. He just booby-trapped all of his friends' houses to keep them safe in his own weird way. He booby-trapped their house on the off chance something like that actually comes up again, and a villain of some sort actually winds up showing up at their house. And of course, Nan and Barty Blake are visibly annoyed with Fred and tell him to get the net off of him as soon as possible, and also call him a buffoon. So of course, he does proceed to retract the net, and at which point, Fred Sr. immediately apologizes, pointing out that it was a big mistake, and also apologizes to Mr. Wang for pointing out that they cause him trouble, and it's at this point where Mr. Wang actually decides he wants to retire and points out that it's already pretty late for him, so he's going to go back to his lodgings. It's not really a house, because he's not staying there permanently. He's just staying in some sort of apartment or something that he's renting until he gets back to China. But in any case, with that, he then proceeds to excuse himself, and it's at this point where Barty lets out a not so subtle backhanded insult toward the Joneses, which Fred Sr. openly takes as an insult. At which point, Barty tells Daphne to just hurry up and get her idiot boyfriend out of there, with Fred not fully understanding the idiot part, and just thinking that he's happy that Barty officially called Daphne his boyfriend, and that he might be warming up to him as well. But in any case, the Mystery Inc. gang then proceed to leave, but in any case, it's at this point where Velma decides to actually break up the friction between everybody, pointing out that everything seems to be getting out of hand, and she just suggests that they start looking for clues. So Scooby immediately gets on that and eventually smells some tea. He eventually discovers some scarlet tea on the ground that makes him sneeze. And what we find out is that the tea is actually very flammable. And noting that there's only one place that he knows that sells that sort of tea, they decide to actually go stake out Chen's Coffee and investigate a little bit. And of course, throughout this episode, throughout this sequence, Daphne is visibly annoyed at Fred, pointing out he booby-trapped the house without her knowledge, and wonders what other kinds of secrets he's actually holding from her. And sure enough, he actually has installed a couple of gadgets in the mystery machine as well that he isn't subtle about having hidden, and even states that he actually he actually does have a periscope installed in the mystery machine as well. But when she asks what else he's actually hiding from her, he merely points out that he's not hiding anything, and that she wished she would just trust him anymore. But she's not really having any of it and still visibly annoyed. So she goes to go for a lip gloss, but it's revealed that there actually is one last booby trap, and that Fred apparently booby trapped the mystery machine to have an eject seat, and in the process of trying to open the glove compartment, Daphne accidentally sets it off and goes flying out of the roof. With Fred just apologizing profusely to her as she forcibly leaves the mystery machine. As funny as it is, it also does kind of further the drama a little bit, because obviously she's visibly annoyed at him for setting up traps without her knowledge or consent. But Meanwhile, Scooby, Shaggy, and Miley are actually kind of discussing the best parts of a stakeout, and Shaggy openly admits that the best part of a stakeout is the food, and that you need to actually prepare several snacks if you want to actually stake out a building for a prolonged period of time, and proceeds to pull out a large doggy bag full of snacks, and tells him that he has all things from all the different major food groups, but he suggests they start with the ice cream since it'll melt. And coincidentally only brought 2 spoons with Scooby being visibly upset about the fact that they only had two spoons, and Velma immediately leans over the back seat, telling Scooby that she understands his pain very well. But in case as they're prepping to actually get ready to start the stakeout, and wonders what's going on with Chen Cafe, they're suddenly attacked by lightning, and are forced to actually flee the mystery machine to get away from the attack. And what they find out is that they're actually being attacked by a different wizard from the one from the party. They initially mistake it for the wizard from the one from the party because it's a white wizard as opposed to a red one, and they think it's the same person. But then the red wizard comes out, and they proceed to actually battle for a brief period with the two of them exchanging words as well as blows, where the red wizard tells the white wizard that the dragon's heart does not belong to him, and that he's never going to get it so long as he stands in his way. Whereas the white wizard merely declares that he can't protect he can't protect the dragon's heart forever, and the two proceed to battle. And it's actually a pretty impressive battle, I should mention. It's very well choreographed, and Shaggy even admits that it would be cool if he wasn't terrified to death of it. But in any case, eventually, while they're fighting, Velma then proceeds to note something interesting about the White Wizard, and that 3 of the 4 rings he's wearing are actually wind up matching the one that Miley is currently wearing, and sure enough, she then proceeds to point out as such to Miley, and wonders what's going on, but they don't have time to actually process that all that much, because it's at that point where the White Wizard actually winds up winning for a brief period and winds up knocking the Red Wizard into a dumpster, at which point he then turns his attention toward the Mystery Inc. and tries to get them to fight, and tries to get the ring away from Miley, at which point Fred suggests that they actually get into the Mystery Machine and flee like hell. And of course it doesn't work, because of course, and everybody knows this. It's at this point where the engine starts acting up, and Fred actually can't get the Mystery Machine to start. But it's at this point where he actually winds up grabbing Miley, but Miley actually winds up fighting back, and the White Wizard actually winds up dropping her, and she winds up getting into the Mystery Machine. At which point they then proceed to run like hell and get as far away from the White Wizard as possible. And it's at this point where they actually come up with a brilliant idea to lose the White Wizard. As Fred eventually realizes that they're actually not going to be able to flee the White Wizard in the Mystery Machine. So Fred actually winds up coming up with a brilliant idea, which is to use the Mystery Machine's eject seat to launch Scooby's bag of snacks into his face and kind of distract him that way. And it does kind of work. Velma Dabney moves over, places the bag of snacks, which then proceeds to get launched into the White Wizard's face and briefly disorients them. And while it doesn't defeat him, it does distract him long enough for the Red Wizard to get back on his feet, and they proceed to actually start fighting again, and the Red Wizard eventually drives him off. But it's at this point where they realize that they actually do need to get Miley home, pointing out that obviously she's not going to be safe so long as the White Wizard is about. So they decide to bring her back home to Velma's house, where she and Shaggy then proceed to start flirting a little bit more. Before Velma breaks the two of them up, and they proceed to actually go into the house with Miley then proceeding to ask what Shaggy's deal is, pointing out that he's cute, but Velma merely points out that not to get interested in him, because, as she points it out, he has dog issues. With Miley not fully understanding. But it's at this point where the power actually winds up going out in their house, and the White Wizard actually winds up showing up and tries to take the ring back from Miley again. And of course, he immediately goes after Miley after a brief confrontation where he tries to electrocute the two of them with his lightning. But it's at this point where Miley fights back, actually. She actually winds up holding her own against the White Wizard pretty handily, and is shown to be an expert at hand-to-hand combat and an expert at martial arts, which Velma can't help but be impressed by, and the two try to leave the house and get as far away from the White Wizard as possible. As Shaggy walks up to the front door, trying to read some Chinese to English dictionary, so we can learn some Chinese and try to flirt with Miley in her native tongue. But and of course he decides to knock on the door exactly as the two of them actually try to flee from the White Wizard, and he winds up getting trampled. And because of that, the White Wizard actually winds up getting the fourth ring, and proceeds to escape, declaring that now the Dragon's Heart will be his. At which point, and of course, the next morning, it's at this point where Velma decides to poke all over the internet, trying to figure out how they're actually supposed to find out more about the Dragon's Heart. But she points out that she's not actually having any sort of luck in actually finding the Dragon's Heart, and points out that it doesn't seem to be all over the internet. But points out that now they need to figure out what it is in fast, because obviously the dragon now has 4 of the rings, with Daphne being confused because she has no idea why, because he already had 3, at which point Shen comes downstairs and upon hearing their conversation realizes the situation, and then decides to actually come clean with them and reveal that he's actually the Red Wizard, which confuses the Mystery Inc. and Miley quite considerably. And what he points out is that he then proceeds to reveal what the Dragon's Heart actually is, and that the Dragon's Heart is a rare gem that has been in his family for generations, and he has been trying to protect it from anybody who might steal it. And points out that because the Dragon's Gem is such a valuable thing to him, he's been trying to protect it at any cost. And of course, when the White Wizard came into Crystal Cove looking for it, he obviously donned the guise of the Red Wizard to fight back and try to keep the White Wizard at bay. But points out that that's ultimately fruitless now, since obviously the White Wizard has all 4 rings. And when they point out that they have no idea, and when they point out that they're very sorry that they let him get the white ring, he then proceeds to point out the legend about how the Dragon's Heart apparently lives inside a Jade Dragon statue that has been passed on from generation to generation. And when Fred points out that they could easily set a trap if they knew where the Jade Dragon was, the chain then proceeds to point out that it's literally in the center of his shop. He literally keeps it as a decorative piece in the middle of his shop, and obviously nobody knows it's actually the thing, because of course he wouldn't be keeping it in the middle of his shop if people actually knew what it was. And once they point out that now that they are able to conclude that they actually have a way to bait a trap, Fred and Daphne both declare that it's time to set a trap, and they seem to have reconciled and are now on equal footing. But in any case, their plan is to actually lower the White Wizard in, with Shen then wheeling the Jade Dragon into the middle of his window, that which he leaves open on purpose, and declares that he hopes nobody will actually come and try to steal it, before wishing everybody a good night. Very loudly, might I mention, to try and get the White Wizard to come to his shop. And with that, he then proceeds to seemingly leave. At which point the White Wizard proceeds to barge in and start shooting lightning throughout the place to try and shut down the shop and get at the Jade Dragon. But it's at this point where Fred actually reveals his trap. As it turns out, he rigged a fireworks launcher to set off the sprinklers to weaken the White Wizard's lightning. So, and at which point he throws a Scooby stack at Scooby to set off a series a lever? You know, a catapult of some kind of thing where that launches the 2 girls, and they drop what is later revealed to be a steel net disguised as a Chinese lantern on him, and it winds up catching him in a large steel cage, with the White Wizard being unable to get out. At which point, Fred Jones Sr. and Fred Jones Sr. then proceed, and Sheriff Stone proceed to barge in and demand to know what's going on. At which point Fred points out that they actually wound up catching the White Wizard, and proceeds to unmask him, and surprising no one, it's Mr. Wang. So And of course, Fred Sr. is immediately wondering why he did it. At which point he reveals that he actually came there under false pretenses. He wasn't there to learn more about American culture. He was there because he decided to actually go looking for the Four Rings that he would need to actually open up the Jade Dragon, and reveals that once he found out that once he discovered that Miley had the fourth one, he knew he was close. So he decided, and the reason why is because he pointed out that the Dragon's Heart is actually very valuable, and that by selling it, it would actually make him very rich. Of course this winds up being and of course he winds up pointing out that he would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for those Maryland kids. But it's at this point where Fred remasks him, pointing out that they've heard it all before. But in case it's at this point where Miley walks up, pointing out that he obviously doesn't need the rings anymore. But then they wonder how he was able to actually start shooting lightning and a whole bunch of other things. And it's at this point where Shen actually walks up, pointing out that he's used the same methods he did. That he used a jetpack to fly and use miniature Tesla coils to shoot lightning. And with Velma pointing out that that's actually pretty brilliant and ingenious. But in any case, once Mr. Wang is actually hauled off to jail, Miley then proceeds to thank everybody for what they did, and proceeds to give Shaggy the four rings that she took from Mr. Wang, pointing out that obviously they belong with Chen, and obviously they would be best kept with him. And now that they actually have kind of a moment of reprieve where they can actually kind of hang out a little bit, Shaggy then decides to ask her out on a date, but he isn't able to actually think of the words, so Scooby actually winds up backing him up and helping him, which Shaggy very much appreciates, and it is kind of a little bit of a character growing moment. Obviously Scooby was very jealous of Shaggy dating people back in the day, but back in a couple of many episodes ago, but he's come around since then, and is actually trying to help his guy pick up girls. So yeah, it's kind of cute. But in case Miley does actually voice interest in Shaggy, she also points out that she can't physically go on a date with him because she's actually going back to China. And when he asks her when she's actually going back, she then proceeds to point out that she's going back in about 10 minutes, and he proceeds to get into the taxi before thanking everybody for everything they've done, and that she won't forget any of them, and proceeds to drive off. And it's at this point where Shaggy openly admits that he knows that this must be what it's like to have your heart broken, and Velma, finally taking sympathy on Shaggy for what happened, points out that they can obviously go and ambush her at the airport, pointing out that that's a very romantic thing to do, to go see somebody off at the airport, and with that Fred then proceeds to drive up to the Mystery Machine, and they all pile in to go see Miley off. Meanwhile, on a ship leaving Crystal Cove, it's revealed that somebody got a hold of the Dragon's Heart and declares that goodbye Crystal Cove and goodbye Mr. Ink. But it's at this point where the boat lurches a little bit, and she actually winds up dropping the Dragon's Heart and into the hands of Shaggy, who reveals that obviously it's Miley. So yeah, he then proceeds to point out that he had figured out that it was actually Miley who had actually stolen the Dragon's Heart, and proceeds to point out that he figured out because obviously she had hold of the dragon gems of the rings at one point, and also points out that she wasn't actually at the airport like she said she would be. So, and of course Miley then does proceed to reveal herself, and does reveal that she is indeed the main antagonist of the episode, and proceed to point out that Shaggy is absolutely right about his assessment, pointing out that of course Miley was the one who used the gems, and while everyone was distracted with unmasking Wang and finding out what his motives were, she wound up stealing the Dragon's Heart for herself and wound up slipping it into her pocketbook. So yeah, because of that, she was actually able to get the Dragon's Gem and tell Shaggy to give it back to her, demanding that she will take it from him by force if necessary. At which point, Shaggy then tells her to simply make her, and proceeds to run out of the cabin. With Miley demonstrating her kung fu ability and proceeding to chase after Shaggy in what is seemingly a one-sided battle where she's easily able to keep with the Shaggy and get a hold of the Dragon's Gem, but then she winds up stepping into a snare trap and getting entrapped as well. And Which when she declares that she points out that she wants the Dragon back, but Dragonheart back, but this is this point where where Shaggy points out Fat Chance and asks her if any of the things she said was real about even including herself, the two of them. But she merely points out rather sarcastically, "Sorry, dude." But it's at this point where Velma actually tells her off, pointing out that that Shaggy's too good for her. It's dark issues or not, which she still doesn't fully understand. At which point Fred comes out and proceeds to tell Barty and Nan Blake to come out, pointing out that the coast is now clear. And sure enough, they come out, and it's revealed that the boat that they actually used that the boat Miley was actually using to actually escape is actually the Blake's personal yacht, and they disguised it as an escape boat. And of course, the Blakes are actually particularly happy about the fact that they were able to actually help, and point out that Fred's trap actually worked this time around, and are kind of impressed with how well that all came together, and point out that he's actually a pretty fine boyfriend for their daughter. But then it's revealed that he actually didn't know where Miley was actually going to wind up stepping, and it actually set up traps all over the place when asked. So which of course the two of them actually wind up setting off and getting trapped in, and they demand to know. They plead to call him a buffoon, with the rest of the group just kind of laughing it off, while Daphne points out that obviously Fred seems to have grown on their parents at least a little bit, even if they won't admit it because he trapped them in a trap. They're particularly happy with it. They do seem to like him in their own way, even if he did wind up getting them stuck in a trap. So. Yeah, this episode is just interesting that it kind of brings back a character from a previous episode, being Chen, and kind of made him relevant to the plot. He was just kind of there in his debut episode, but here he's actually kind of important to the plot somewhat. He kind of comes back, and we kind of learn a bit more about him, and that he was guarding a very important gemstone, and while the bad guy did ultimately get it, it's presumed he got it back at the end of the episode, but yeah, I do like this episode because it kind of just sets up this dueling set of antagonists, but one of them is actually a good guy while the other is a bad guy, unlike the Humongonauts who are just kind of fighting to compete against each other. And I do kind of like that aspect of the episode. But in any case, yeah, that's gonna do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!